Hi, I'm Shannon Leeds, and I'm really excited to be here with DevSecCon. Such a great event. I think I started with DevSecCon many years ago. I'm a CEO and founder of Third Score, a trust ecosystem company. Um, let's get started. So today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about DevSecOps and our journey with the multi-billion-dollar industry. A little bit more about me. I started this company about a year and a half back called Third Score, and we do trusted ecosystem work. What does that mean? Well, we focus on accelerating value for AI metrics and building a trusted portfolio. For those that don't know me very well, I started DevSecOps about 15 years ago when we were trying to go all in on the cloud when I was at Intuit. The focus for DevSecOps has always been about building adversary resilient software that customers love. In particular, I remember back when we first started DevSecOps, and I have a big passion for it, that this industry is one of bright vibrance and community. I think that we're continuing the effort collaboratively across the industry, and that's been really a great thing from my perspective. Today, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the waves of technology, what we've learned along the way, where we are in this journey, some of the things that we have to consider for AI, and some of the things that have been inspired through the DevSecOps capabilities. You can see here that, and by the way, I started with mainframes, so I remember that far back on the journey with technology. And now you can see as we get forward on our journey together collectively, we're moving towards AGI. And even beyond that, we're starting to talk about super intelligence from a compute standpoint. These waves have been long in some cases, short in others. They compound on each other. And that actually causes us to all have to work in ways that we don't always expect, which means effectively change is inevitable. And then when change is inevitable, if I go all the way back to back when I saw the beginning of change when it came to cybersecurity and software development, waterfall capabilities just weren't necessarily all that fast, right? We were all basically building software together. There were serial processes. Everybody was doing exchanges of like, well, what do we need to put into a product and how do we actually package it up? And most of the software at that time was actually packaged software. In some cases, you were actually just moving code onto large hardware. But mobile really brought forward the need for software publishing to speed up. And I think that's where the changes really started. And then the demand for faster publishing got in between sort of that SaaS and cloud capability. We saw the need for things like what we called utility computing, which eventually began to be public cloud. For me, that begins the prioritization exercise that we saw. When all things are basically in play, if you look at all the waves, what do you really have to do? Well, we have in the industry this idea of prioritization. You can have speed and cost, or you can have speed, cost, and quality at some percentage. When I look at what's been happening over the last couple of decades, I really see a push towards speed and cost being the primary drivers of all the changes that we've seen so far. And quality is not left out, but it's been really dynamically changing in a way that I don't know that we've really expected with technology. What does that really mean? Well, speed has always been a relentless pursuit, and to get to survival. Most companies that are trying to dynamically push forward are working on their speed. That comes at the pursuit of prioritization against cost, and really where transformation begins is affordability. Affordability, as we all know, sometimes starts with things like layoffs in the industry. And that's sad to me because that means that there may be a wave of change that's actually not gotten its full durability, its investment, and that can actually be a pursuit that causes legacy issues to evolve. And then also quality. And I've seen a lot of companies really pushing forward with customer driven innovation and solving quality over time. I think we've seen that already in this last couple of years with things like generative AI, where it was pushed forward before many of the issues that have actually plagued its existence were solved for. Very interesting, if you ask me. So what does that all mean? Well, it means that complexity and security have been that, dotted line all the way around all three of these. If we couldn't afford one of the three, then the complexity and security commonly comes at a cost of trying to deal with speed and cost issues when we prioritize those pretty heavily. And ultimately, do we have security and complexity when it comes to customer-driven innovation? Absolutely. And the question is, how do we really all afford this? What does this look like on paper first, and then ultimately in practice? And to me, that's the beginning of the DevSecOps capabilities, like how we actually arrived at this location. My journey starts there in those priorities. And ultimately, I remember when DevSecOps was born, it was born at Intuit while I was there. And was it born by Intuit? No, not necessarily. It was an industry-wide capability. If I look at all the companies, all the participants, everybody who was actually looking to do this work, it was by everyone, really. But what I thought was unique about Intuit is we were all in on the public cloud at the time, moving towards AWS, going away from a data center in a financial services software company. Absolutely amazing. And what you see up on the screen is actually the beginning of what Intuit calls its city map. I see this as a very integral reason why it's a continually successful company. And it was also a big part of the puzzle of how we actually moved from the data center that we lived in to the public cloud, because essentially capabilities were digestible into chunks, into things that we could actually move to a public cloud capability. From that came essentially, as a security professional back then, traditional security capabilities were really prominent. We had to look at and do more work around what was in existence at the time, and also figure out what we were doing for things like future types of work. Commodity bound work was out. We were actually able to buy things like vulnerability scans. We were able to do certain things, but we weren't able to do reviews at scale. We weren't able to do things like software reviews at scale or code reviews at scale. And that was actually one of the paramount reasons why DevSecOps was born. From this work on a Wordly map, eventually I did a little bit of a study on what really was happening at the time that these two big changes were being pushed forward with mobile and cloud and SaaS. And the security industry's response to all of this has been very much a bolt on to what was originally a zero trust quest. But let's face it, when cost is an issue, then what gets caught first in that triangle is commonly the security and complexity challenges that actually underpin all of the ways of success for all these technology changes. And so basically at the bottom of this stack, you'll see that zero trust is there. And then when that doesn't quite work, we start bolting on. And so when somebody talks about bolted on security, I commonly see that solutions in the industry are effectively bolt-ons to something that may not actually be working in the zero trust arena. Like we're actually, concerned about identity challenges. Well, that's because maybe some of the identity challenges are born from the fact that the new use case wasn't onboarded to a zero trust capability or an identity-based capability. And so this was actually really revolutionary towards the thought process of, well, what is the public cloud truly missing? If we're going to move at speed and scale for DevOps, then where do we get the security stuff from? And essentially at the time, the public cloud was missing core zero trust capabilities. That means that they built a bunch of cloud provided services, but without all the security things that folks needed to get confidence that they could move their stuff safely into the public cloud. And with that originated the need to really think about the problem space different. I know that we had some concept of threats and adversaries versus essentially controls and entities. That means your organization and its control paradigm against the adversaries. And we still have some of this within the industry. But truly, I don't know that that actually was the real challenge when you were moving to, say, a much faster way of operating, DevOps. Instead, actually, what happens is customers are actually the originator of where value is created. And if value is created through customers, then adversaries are really the anti-value of an organization. It's basically, how do I actually do something that's going to abuse your products or do something that you don't expect? So that these two rings become very paramount to how you think about building something safely. And if I look at most organizations, they focus back on the threat, if you will, or the control, if you will, but they really rarely talk about things like adversaries and the organization and its customers in a way that brings security to the forefront. So the words DevSecOps, or mashed all together, development, security, and operations all together, is to really highlight the need for having a total addressable market without adversaries in it to arrive at a much higher level of product value. And to me, that just that essence of what it takes to build software safely is crucial. With that, since the whole market really wasn't talking about adversaries at the time, we sort of decided to, in our quest, go off onto our own journey. And so I think a lot of us decided to leave traditional security behind because we truly wanted to join the ranks of folks that were developing software and operating software. And you couldn't really decide on what the public cloud requirements were if you weren't actually doing the work on the public cloud. So I remember the first few meetings where I actually sat at the table, in the future, I bet people would actually have killed to have been at this table when it was born. And the truth is there are many people who would have liked to have been there when it actually started and originated, because we were moving from a mindset of a holistic approach to, moving from a one size fits all approach to a holistic approach, really figuring out what was going to be needed, building alongside developers, having lots of conversations. Most meetings back then weren't just to go talk about what we might do, but actually what we were going to do and then build it. And so they were very different than some of the prior times that I had been part of at other organizations. I think with that came the beginning of what essentially was zero trust. Moving into the public cloud, you didn't have four walls to worry about anymore. You didn't have physical security. You were moving away from things like networks and firewalls towards security groups. So we decided to have a concept of leveraging account, zoning, and also being able to break up workloads in ways that made it so we had the concept of zero trust. I remember wrapping DNS filtering all the way around everything at the time and deciding on zoning and containment and asset management. For those on the right here, you'll see what we call the security hierarchy of needs. This is essentially how we were prioritizing decisions about what we would focus on first, second, third, and realizing that encryption was really paramount, but it also had, because it wasn't really done at the time we were trying to move all in, we had to solve for some of these problems because there was definitely data that needed to be encrypted along the way. And that also gave what I believe is the heart and soul of DevSecOps, the SDLC, the secure SDLC, a prominent stage finally. While we had SDLC products, we had SaaS capabilities, we had SCA capabilities at the time, it really wasn't, they weren't getting the traction and the love in the development community that they really deserved to have, because essentially it was just another tool or another thing to do. But when you basically shine a light on the fact that you have to have safe software, ultimately bringing all of these things together, I again think it's a crucial part of the discovery, if you will. And also a feedback loop. I can't tell you enough how the feedback loop has changed my entire thought process around what it means to build safe software, because bringing tons of data in, having telemetry, those of you who have had the chance to work on things like observability know full well that without data, you really can't make great decisions. And I think this begins the process of what we call measurable next generation capabilities, having that understanding of what is important data, what isn't. I remember dealing with petabytes of data and actually trying to get down to those actionable insights so that we could provide telemetry back to actual decision makers and within the development scheme. And so if you think about all the different products and services that had to go on to move what has become really big software in its lifetime, the feedback loop is really critical. So with all of that actually turned into something really amazing. I got a chance to look at just the evolution of what Intuit has done, and through the time that I was there and even prior. But what its evolution really amounted to is just some of the best work of my life, where really we brought together these concepts of working together, collaborating, customer-driven innovation, and truly reconcile them. And remember that first city map that I showed you? Well, it eventually turned into a complete map of all capabilities, composition-based applications, all the way through domain capabilities. And you'll even see in here that Intuit is representing its security as part of that community. And to me, that means that security has to evolve from traditional security capabilities all the way into services. And that is truly, in my mind, this is actually probably the best example I could show someone of what DevSecOps truly looks like at a mature level within the industry, because security has a seat at the table. It's something that's actually part of the service value development and alongside everything else. I'm going to fast forward to artificial intelligence because you can see in the slide that I showed you that Intuit had moved on to artificial intelligence. I left a couple years back, but I believe that some of the work that they have been continuing on from when I left has also inspired me to take my journey towards artificial intelligence. I've been working on it for about 15 years now. And some of that big data that we talked about for the feedback loop was really about artificial intelligence and machine learning and deep learning capabilities, working with some of the best products on the market, trying to also bring security to those as well. And I think artificial intelligence now is here to stay. We're finally at a point where it's becoming more commoditized. We're actually talking about it. So it is our next wave. It's the wave that's here now. This is a line that you'll see from Menlo Ventures that's actually critical to our next thought process about what the big drive is. And actually, I think they kind of get it wrong. I'll just say that out loud, which is I think that they say mobile was the most transformational, it was the fastest moving. I actually think that Gen AI and AI are actually going to continue to push forward because there's so much amazing innovation that can be done with it. It's another building block in my mind, and I just don't think we've fully reconciled what it could truly mean for the organizations that we work in. And so with that, I will also say that I went back to my roots of Wardley mapping, and this Wardley map you'll see here shows the speed and increase of risk within the industry that's happening right now because we've really moved to commodity before we've got things like content security and lineage and traceability and validation and some of these like really core concepts to how we're going to build secure, safe, again, safe software. Because AI, while everyone thinks about it as being AI, is actually just, again, part of the software stack that we're all working towards and building together as a community. And I'll just say that that has also inspired maybe a reset of what cybersecurity can bring in terms of value to the forefront of your organization. I believe these are the 5 core capabilities: researching adversaries, planning defenses, mitigating threats, verifying controls, and containing incidents. Sometimes in maps that I see with capabilities, I see that we don't have prominence for what cybersecurity can really do for the organization. I see things like, the beginning of a future of adversary management, but ultimately, I think this is going to be where cybersecurity brings its biggest value to the industry. And with that, I think we have to start to bring adversaries to the forefront. No one really talks about this at the way that they have to. Like, how many developers, how many folks working on AI are really talking about whether they have an insider threat concern? Or maybe they're worried about their supply chain, but they should be. And ultimately, this should be something that you're measuring within your organization. If you look back on that map I showed you for Intuit, they have something called adversary management. And again, I think they're at the leadership position, the enviable leadership position of what the future really holds for all of us. If we take all of our capabilities like SDLC capabilities and SAST and DAST and all of these different wonderful products that are out there, and we aim them at the adversaries to remove their exploitable opportunities, ultimately we're going to have a safer internet, if you ask me. And that means that we've got to have things like risk matrices as well as capability maps. And we've got to have the forefront in front of us of what our adversary scorecard looks like with our securability numbers. And maybe one of your targets is no longer 0 breaches, but the level of adversary resilience that you're playing at to go along with the incidents that you might have. I think finally, I'll leave you with this maturity model that's been developed on the Cyber City map. It's something that I've been pushing on for the last year with a set of community members. I think this is going to be paramount for all of us to get on board and actually move to stage 5. And so last but not least, our next steps. What are you going to do with all this information? You're going to move forward with capabilities, adversaries, and metrics. Thank you so much for your time today. It was wonderful to talk to you about the journey, and I hope you got a lot out of it. Please do consider looking up adversary information and going to the Cyber City map.